Dobrý večer, dobrý večer, dobrý večer. Prý akademická čtvrthodinka pochází z Padovy, z univerzity v Padově, protože studenti se přesouvali z jedné hodiny na druhou a profesor zůstával na stejném místě, tak to trvalo prý 4 hodiny. Tak my vždycky začínáme o 4 hodiny, tak nám to odpuste, ale můžete za to samozřejmě i vy, kteří chodíte později. A vítám vás na naší listopadové akci, na cyklu Jiná perspektiva. Dnes představíme 2 přednášející. Jedním z nich je Raul z TAM architekti. Ten bude uvádět přednášku, bude mluvit o stavění vlastně v zemích, řekněme, 3. světa a ve válečných zónách. A bude pokračovat Alexander Brodsky o jeho vlastně osobní architektuře a určitě se zmíní i o působení ve Švýcarsku. Jinak máme několik novinek. Těma novinkama jsou, že v prosinci pravděpodobně nevystoupí Rudy Ricciotti, protože pravděpodobně budeme muset přesunout jeho přednášku na jiný termín v příštím roce. Zároveň ale prosincová přednáška proběhne se španělskými architekty, takže určitě doražte. Druhá novinka je dlouhodobější. Budeme dlouhodobě rušit náš stánek kruhu na akcích, takže máte jednu z posledních možností si dneska koupit nějaký vánoční dárek. Ještě příští přednáška bude taky, pak bude všechno vlastně už jenom online. Tak nebudu zdržovat. Děkujeme všem, že jste dorazili, děkujeme za váš zájem o architekturu, děkujeme našim příznivcům, partnerům a organizacím, co nás podporují. A teď se podíváme na pár videí. Tak já bych na pódium pozvala prvního přednášejícího, Raula Pantalea z TAM Architects. You are welcome in Prague, and this is your microphone.
Thank you. How do we go on with here? Can we start? Of course, well, as usual, never works. Okay, good. So thank you very much for this invitation. Sorry for my Italian English, so I hope you will understand. I'm Raul Pantaleo. I'm a member of TAMassociati. TAMassociati is an architect association. I would like to call it more a collective of architects. We are good friends and that we have been working now over 20 years. The main office is based in Venice, but we are working as a hub of different independent offices that are somehow trying to explore the idea of architecture as a collective process of creating projects. We have 2 more offices in Bologna, in Trieste, and the graphic design is based in Paris. Through 20 years, from 98 actually has been our first work as a social design. And actually it's a good coincidence that this year is 70 years of the Declaration of Human Rights, and our first work was in 98 for the 50th celebration of the Declaration of Human Rights. Through these 20 years, we have been working in 4 continents, 16 different countries in the most remote area. And I like this picture is the picture that's showing the poverty, and you see the red dots are basically placed in most of these countries. As I was mentioned before, we try to do impact design, social design as you want. Impact is the American, they call it impact design. That are, the definition from the American is an innovative solution to the world's most pressing social and environmental challenges. Basically for us it's been a choice of trying to make a coincidence of our dreams about working as architect for the growth of the society. My professor at the University of Venice, the great historian Manfredo Tafuri, was saying the architect is like a lawyer, always the lawyer or the architect or somebody. At that time at the university we were thinking, well, we are free, we do whatever we want and so on. Slowly we start to understand that it was very important to behave as the architect of somebody, and we decide to work for all that realities that are somehow perceiving the social good. That means cooperative, can be NGO, can be non-profit organization, or can be also private that are behaving in a way to challenge the social good. Our vision is architecture as a service to community. As I was mentioning at the beginning, the idea is not to be anymore on top of the pyramid of the architecture. I mean, the architect is Deus ex machina that's giving his design, but be part of a process, mainly a social process, that is stressing the capacity of changing the society in putting the public, the general interest as the center of the project. So in fact, especially in the time when we start to work with this dream, we just abandoned the idea of working with a private client, and we start to try this adventure of working only for let's say, client, it's not the correct partner, that were working for social good. We start in the 90s in Italy. There has been a big movement of what is called the third sector. That is not the private, the public, but is the private that is working with social means. That can be fair trade, can be cooperative, can be NGO. So at that time, this was just a movement that was growing and developing, and we could somehow follow this process. It has been very hard because there was not a demand of architecture. I mean, that world was not demanding architecture. They were very much connected with the idea. We have to do things. What is the architect for? I mean, so somehow in this year, we also try to invent a client. I call it client, but a partner, because especially in that world, there was absolutely no need in architecture. I mean, architecture, the architect was considered as somebody that's spending a lot of money, making crazy things, making things that are not realizable, and so on, so on. So somehow it has been a very big challenge for us, also because we are a non-profit organization in terms of organization, but we are living of this work. So it was important to somehow also understand this partner that it was important to have good design. It was good design means good quality of space, and also then slowly they start to understand means also good marketing for themselves. So the coincidence of this year, 10th of December, is 70 years of the Declaration of Human Rights. We had this document always on our table because we strongly believe that this has been somehow one of the best result that we had in the world, in the Western countries especially, and the update of this document, the Global Goals for Sustainable Development, that is of 2015. It's a very important update because in the Declaration of Human Rights, it was just a very philosophical declaration, and the global goal is really very pragmatic, and also is covering the big lack of sustainability that was in the Declaration of Human Rights. 17th goals to end poverty, fight inequality, and stop climate changes. So, of course, this is just the big declaration, the big intent, but we try to focus all our project within this frame. I just make a short presentation of some of the project. This is Salam Center in Sudan. Actually, this is the prize we won, the Aga Khan Award. That is the cardiac surgery hospital in 2007. This is a very recent project. Is a project in Senegal, and here you see all the goals that we perceive with this project. This is a prototype for a housing with a water recycling system, working with a natural material. This is a pavilion for all faith, again in Sudan. And going to Europe, this is our just this is a co-housing project. We did many co-housing projects. Co-housing is a community way of living together. And this is for us a very, very important project because actually this has been one of the first projects that we did on a bigger scale for the Ethic Bank. Ethic Bank is a bank in Italy that is working in an ethic way. It has been one of the first in Europe. And actually, as I was mentioning at the beginning, for us, we are first citizen activists, then architects. So we have been activists in the foundation of the bank. We have been part of the cooperative since the beginning. And this bank for us has been somehow the realization of a dream, of a long process just to work for the foundation of the bank, having the bank and then designing the headquarters. This is the headquarters again in Italy, in Milano, of the biggest Italian NGO we're working for. It's called Emergency. Actually, all the projects I will show you tonight are part of this this NGO. This is a church in a very, very abandoned area in Italy, so it's also another non-profit client. This is a project in Uganda. It's a cinema school of Mira Nair. She's a very famous Indian filmmaker that established this school to train the African filmmaker in Uganda. And this is another project in Uganda that is the Makerere University Library. We are working on different projects in Uganda right now. We are working on a big hospital with Renzo Piano, but this is another long story. And this is actually somehow what we consider as the result of all these 20 years of work under the water. Nobody was considering the social design, and in 2016, out of the blue, we got a call from the Minister of Culture. Can you imagine the Minister of Culture in Italy just asking us that we were completely out of any part of party or whatever, just to be the curator of the Italian pavilion at the Venice Biennale. That has been somehow the official recognition worldwide of, let's say, social design at the Venice Biennale, also through the work of Aravena. So, in fact, we strongly believe that this has been somehow, we hope, the beginning of a new story, and you see a lot of young architects or young people. I mean, what we try to prove is that it's possible to design things for the 99% of the world. You know, I'm nothing against the big artists or the big architects that are designing the 1%, but what about the rest? As I was mentioning before, when we start to work with this intent, there was not really somebody was asking for a design and architecture. So just to stress the idea of what we want to express, we made a selection of the work that are we placed it in this war and post-war architecture, and we start with just mentioning the declaration, the global goals. It is possible to end poverty, fight inequality, and stop climate change through design and beauty. I mean, what we realize in this 20 years, and what we try to prove in this 20 years, that good architecture, I don't know if we are doing good architecture, but at least we are trying, beauty and design can be useful, can be essential in the process, in the healing process of society that are suffering. Just to focus on what we intend of war, since 1946, the civil victim grew from 15% of the First World War to 19%, and probably right now they are much higher. So, and this within this civilian victim, only 7% are soldiers. The rest are civilian, and 34% as children. You will see the number in Afghanistan. And this is the result of the war. The result of the war is poverty, is immigration, are desperate people that are just trying to have a future. And Syria, unfortunately, a very, very significant example. So this is just a map of 2015 of the number of immigrants that came to Italy, to Greece. Within this context, what is the role of design and beauty? I mean, this has been for us a very, very dramatic question. You know, if you work, these are all places we have been working. If you work in Afghanistan in the middle of the war, or in Sudan, or in Iraq, or in Italy, I show you a project in the suburbs of Italy. Of course, the first thing everybody is asking is to give response to emergency, just to give the response to practical issue. But the global goals, and just talking of global goals, but the general demand tackled to the problem of poverty and war is a rational and technical way of approaching this project. And of course, I mean, water and sanitation, just give a shelter, it's the first need. But something is missing. And something is missing is something very relevant, because talking of people that are suffering poverty or war, we are talking of people that need to have a hug, need to have to be considered as human being. And with this engineering approach to poverty, to war, always is missing design and beauty. And we try to prove through our work that design and beauty within the limited budget, limited time, limited condition that you can have in a war area, architecture can make the difference. So we are dreaming to add one more goal to the global goal, so we are very modest. And so there is an 18th goal that actually is the goal I would like to share with you tonight, that it's part of our small experience in this condition. So, in fact, nothing new. Going back to 1445, so we are talking of Renaissance. Filippo Brunelleschi, the architect of the big cupola in Florence, designed Ospedale degli Innocenti. It's a hospital for orphanage and for poor people. It's one of the many examples. I realized this just by chance. Also Filarete designed Ospedale dei Poveri in Milano, in Naples, and if you probably go around Europe, it's the same. So in fact, what is interesting in the Renaissance, when the important person of that time, of course, it's also a game of power, decide to design a hospital for the suffering population, he called the best architect of that time. So that's something that is completely new now, but in fact is part of the history. And this is just a painting of inside showing how they represent the innocent, the orphanage going to be taken care in the hospital. So our vision. We try with our small work, where you will see there is not... on some project there is really little architecture, but actually the project I would like to focus with you is exactly a project where there is really little architecture, just to prove that there is a lot of space in design also in this condition. So the first area I want to share you, the area of war, really war. We have been working, and actually we are working in Ashkarga with 2 different projects in Afghanistan. And just the number of Afghanistan are dramatic, 10,000 civilian victims. Actually, this year, 2018, has been the year with the biggest number of civilian victims since the beginning of the war. We developed 3 different projects with this Italian NGO. And this is a very small project in Kabul. This is a hospital of emergency, the NGO, that is a hospital specialized on war victims. That means bombs and all that. So, as usual, we try to put the project. Actually, we were asked to design the new OT block and the new intensive care units, and we try to put, all our the project within the frame of the global goal. But I would like just to share with you the 18th, what we are imagining, the 18th goal. What makes the difference of just designing a hospital in a war area, putting some dream, some creativity, some hope in the project. So the first thing we imagined was to design an iconic element against the war, then try to design healing spaces, and then work also on a very technical part about life cycle. So this is the wall that is hosting the OT block, operating theater. So it's a very technical project. Of course, we had an engineering that was just designing this machine, because hospital basically are a machine. But we want to design this wall as an iconic element, that this red wall was something like we want to say, from this wall, we want to start a new story. So as you see, when I was talking of design, it's just a very simple building. It's just a wall. But through the color, through the design of the wall, we try to express this will of just giving future to this country, just to give a hope. I mean, design is the place where you start to share with the people hope. And I'm very, very fond of this picture, because behind the wall there is something that's never appear in the hospital in Western country. This is the area of the hard triage of the mass casualty. When there's a big explosion, there are coming hundreds of patients, so they have to make a triage. So we try to design a place, to design it's open to the garden. We made a garden. We made this red wall. Of course, it's a very basic element. But this makes a lot the difference, because normally the people are used to what is on the left, just places, just rooms. And we try to generate through very simple element the quality of space. And here, of course, for an architect, it's nothing, but to have windows in an intensive care unit, it has been a big fight, because everybody wants to say, well, why you have windows, they are generating problem. And this is a very, very particular project, because we have also to work on waste treatment, hospital waste treatment, and we pushed with the idea of designing the container. So I just start with a very, very rough project, but in a very rough country, and I will go on with Afghanistan again. This is in Panjshir Valley. You see, it's a very remote valley north of Afghanistan. Emergency has a hospital there, and we were asked to design a maternity there. Maternity, it's very, very delicate issue in Afghanistan, because of women, because of war, because of the idea of future. So the first thought we had, it was to have a healing space, a space in itself that was a kind of process through architecture to heal the people, a joy and try to express the joy of birth. I will go back to this. Then genius loci e physiognomic. So this is the context. This is the middle of nowhere. And as I was mentioning, maternity is just an event of the life. It happened. I mean, there is no joy. There is, it's just, I wouldn't say mechanic, but there is no happiness. Because when you have a child in Afghanistan, you know that it's a person that hardly will survive. So we try to work with this idea of having a fresh space, just using light color, just playing with the color in the rooms. Of course, again, here, there are very, very small elements that I was telling you at the beginning. We prove that with very simple element, and this doesn't cost to use the colors like that. It's just a matter of designing. We could have a jolly place for the community there that really appreciate enormously the effort of designing a building. And I always say, when you go to a place, the first thing you see is the facade of the building that is welcoming you. So the facade of the building is telling you what is behind this building. And here we want to work with a building. It's a very, very elementary building, but with this game of the window that are running one after the other, we want to give this happiness of the birth. Also, the roof, it's very structural element, is becoming a game, and the facade is introducing an element of dialogue with the with the future, the mother that will have babies. So the idea that the facade, it's in itself something that is reminding to a game, to a toy. And genius loci, and then in this very, very delicate context, the idea of having this very thin line of the hospital in front of the valley, and just try to integrate the hospital carefully and with respect. Respect, it's the key word for our work. Here we go to what I consider the most interesting project, because it deals with architecture, or I don't know if it deals with architecture, but this for us has been an extraordinary challenge. Iraq, we have been working in the Iraqi Kurdistan 3-4 years ago. It was we were asked to design clinics in the refugee camp, and the number again are dramatic, 2.5 million internal refugees in the area of Kurdish Iraqi. This is a Quaratu clinic. All the IDPs, the internal displaced person, has been placed in the middle of the desert, or in summer is desert, in winter is just with snow. And here the big challenge has been budget versus design. The challenge was to use the same money, the same module, prefabricated module, the same BOQ that were used to design this, because this is the reality, to prove that within that budget it was possible to generate a space that could be a place where you host people, where you, I mean, the etymology of hospital is hosting person. So this on the left is the standard hospital clinic, and this prefabricated module, just using prefabricated module, the only element is just to build it. And on the right is our project, just a very simple project with the same budget. I mean, this is important, exactly with the same budget, the same time, but with a bit of care on the things. So this is the clinic you see, on behind are just the modules. It's exactly like the module that were coming from the UN IDPs, UN or whatever. Here is just a replication of the same clinic with a different typology, because the interesting thing, and this for us has been a great success, that the Kurdish government start to use this as a basic module. I mean, so now the clinics for the IDPs are designed with this. We discover they just took the project, it's an open source, so that's for us it was a big result. And this is the waiting area. I mean, the waiting area I was there, it was so desperating. I mean, and we try to work with something that you can see the garden outside. The garden is for us a very essential element. And so this small hospital, this is another typology, it was bigger, became a sort of landmark in that nowhere land. So as you see, again, there's a red wall. You know, you will start to notice we like red walls, but actually the red is also the color of the organization. Is the only life signal inside the desperation. And of course here, what made really the difference is there was somebody that was really taking care of doing something. Going to Darfur, we did 2 different projects in Darfur in 2004 during the war, and 2010 at what was officially called the end of the war. The number, again, sometimes it's good to see the number, because they show you the dimension of the disaster. Then we're just talking of politics that has been generate also from wrong political action, but this is another story. We were asked to design a pediatric clinic, again for the Italian NGO, and this is start to be a project of architecture. It was a building inside of in Nyala is the capital of South Sudan. In this project, after 10 years at the end of the war, with the most impressive amount of money that were put in that area, nothing was there. I mean, I went to visit the hospital in Nyala during the war and after the war, and in fact, with the millions of dollars that were put in the cooperation, nothing has changed. So this for us was a very important project to enlighten the possibility for the people to have a hope of that the building would talk about the hope of a possible future. Again, the element of the 18th goal, healing spaces, genius logic, physiognomic, healing gardens, natural cooling. And then you will see also how the technology, the cooling can become a part of design. This is the hospital of Nyala after the restoration on the left. I mean, I was really impressed. And the idea of this is a pediatric to work with this roof, this colored roof that also has a cooling effect because it's very fresh. And Genius Loci, we tried to design a building that was rooted with the typology of the Arabic house. So it's a building that respects the context. And just I was mentioning today, this hospital has been closed for 5 years because of security reason. And I was really impressed when we went there, everything was on the table. That means that in a country where they steal everything for 5 years, the people respect this place. Now, this year we will open again the hospital, but security conditions are much, much better. So, Genius Loci is also what I was talking about, the facade. You know, this bamboo frame are exactly the bamboo frame that they are using to make the fences in the refugee camp. So we just use that technique just to make the facade of the building and generate shading system. And should be, well, anyway, the wind tower, then I will explain you later, is that tower. We use the wind tower to design the facade in form of the Sphinx. This is the iconic element of Darfur. So again, architecture is giving a face to what you want to say. So here you see this is the result of the facade. We are talking of very, very simple element. Again, is this game of the windows that are running one after the other. And a crucial element in all our project that doesn't cost anything are the gardens. Gardens are crucial in the design. This project has been designed around this fantastic baobab, and this became the only garden in the whole area. And so we start to add the element of this small method. It's just very cheap element is color, the landscape or very basic landscape, but these are making a lot the difference in terms of design of a space. And this belongs to the goal number 7, the cooling system that we somehow invent for the clinics. The result is in this number, we could cool 800 square meter with 6 kilowatts. 6 kilowatt are just to air conditioning, and this was something that we studied through the Bajir system. That's typical Arabic country cooling system. You catch the wind from the tower, bring in the basement. Then there is a filtering with a mechanical filter, and then there is adiabatic cooling, that is a water cooler, and then it's inflate in the building through this underground channel, so the benefit also of the ground cooling. So just to show that this approach is not just something, an approach that belongs to this far experience. This is a project we did in Naples. The number of the refugees in Italy is now starting to be about 150,000. But through this project, we want also to show how it was possible to design a place where these people that are just escaping from the war. I mean, it's quite interesting because we found patient that we had in Afghanistan and in Iraq coming to Italy, and then they ended up in our clinics in Italy. So it has been something quite interesting to when they were talking and say we have been guested in this structure as we were in our homeland. This is the surrounding of Naples. Ponticelli, I would say sometimes is more dangerous than Afghanistan. It's an area completely under not completely, but with the very strong power of local criminality, Camorra. And this is a very small project. I mean, this is a basic clinic. Here, what we found there, I mean, when they knew that we were going to intervene in the building, they destroyed everything. It's a public building. And it has been really a strong challenge just to design something that was generating a square, a public square inside this horrible building. This is a public building, abandoned public building where we designed the clinic. So the colorscape, again, just small volumes, very pure volumes, again, with using the color as the element that's generating the space, and inside a square, a public square with a tree. The element of the tree, you will see it's running through all the project. I was in Iraq when we started to build our first clinic. We spent a couple of days just putting some trees. It's a very banal thing in front of the clinic, and it has been so strong, the impact to the local people, that there was somebody that was taking care to their life, just planting trees, that one of the nurses say, well, she went to the head nurse and say, cut part of the stipendium because I want to pay to the tree. So I'm talking of very, very basic element, but a very elementary element. But this shows how design can be effective in this extreme condition. These are just mobile clinics that are following the refugees, and especially the refugees that are working in south of Italy. And again, there is a big care on the small detail, and it's just a matter of culture. I always say it's very strange. For instance, I was having a conference with the chief of the Red Cross, and at the end of the conference, he came to me and said, well, but very interesting, but are you an engineer? I say, well, no, I'm a designer, I'm an architect. And he was very impressed by the fact that an architect could follow the project in this extreme condition. And I think the message is that somehow we have to start to have a new generation of architects that are working for 99% of the population, and that has a need that is and with this small project, we prove that design makes the difference. We go back to Sudan. This could be the chapter of post-war I'm going to end. We work in, this is Port Sudan. In Port Sudan is a small city on the sea that has been pushed all the refugees of all the Sudan war. We are talking of 1.5 million of IDPs. In Port Sudan, they move about 300,000 refugees. But before, I would like just to show you a very small project. This was a support project to the Salam Center, the first hospital I showed you at the beginning. We have to design the house of the doctor that were hosted to the hospital, and we try to concentrate with the idea of recycling the container that in Sudan have dead end, because Sudan is not convenient to send back the container. So in the desert there are 1,000 million probably of container abandoned. And we were part of this game because we shipped about 97 container for all the equipment for the cardiac surgery hospital, and they were abandoned on the river. So it was, you see, the condition of the containers are not the smart container that you see on the magazine in the Dutch activity. So these were completely broken. So we try to prove that less than 500 euros by square meter, that's the normal cost for a house. It was possible to reuse the container, just leave it there, and to design a building, to design a place, and also to prove that, like in the desert area, it was possible to use the container in a sustainable way. So we work a lot on the idea of shell, on shading system. Again, you see this shading system element that comes from the tradition of the construction, the local construction. And again, the garden become, healing garden become an essential part of the project, inside, outside. This is just internal of the house, of the houses. And it's very important, the environmental impact of the project, because we balance 76 tons of emission of the shipping of the container in Sudan with planting 162 trees of forestation. So somehow, as you see, it's the design is linked in a very strong way to the sustainability effort of designing something that can be sustainable, not only socially but also environmental. And this is the last project I would like to share with you, is in Port Sudan, as I was mentioning before. In this desert, they pushed all the desperate of the refugees that were spread all over the country, and in particular in that area. So we were dreaming to design a garden instead of a clinic. This is a pediatric clinic. We want to design something that could be strongly rooted to the genius loci, but we want to give a strong message in the middle of the desert of having a garden. So basically, this is the context. The idea of having this very neat design, very neat clinic with very basic volumes that are very much linked also to the typical settlement of the Arabic house, but especially trying to give a message to the future of these people that are living in this condition. So we want to have a very strong facade that was going to give a lot of different messages. So the game of the circle, again, this joyful element, the central part is the reminding us the local traditional architecture that is with the coral stone and masharabia shading system, and the most important, the garden in front of the clinic. And here you see the element of design that are the typical element, the coral stone facade. And actually the coral stone facade is very interesting because coral stone now is not possible to use anymore. So we used the stone that were coming from the jail that they were demolishing. So somehow also to link with the local tradition. But more important, this is the only garden in the whole area. And this is a picture taken a couple of years ago. The first one was in 2012. But this is the surrounding of how people are living. So this element of the garden doesn't come just by, landscape, we want to have a garden. It's part of a technical process because we did all design of recycling system of the sewage. So the water comes from the water that is used in the hospital, so we could water the garden through the recycling water. And this is, again, a very strong element of the tree inside, in the middle of the waiting area. So it's a message to the people that are, and especially to the children, that this building is just taking care of them. And again, the healing space, just the use of color as an element of dialogue that actually is mixing with this beautiful color of the ladies. And here, again, the idea of working with affordable and clean energy to just generate a space where people are feeling good. Because if you are living in outside 50 degrees, to have 30 degrees inside of fresh air, it's just giving quality to space. So going back to the question at the beginning, it is possible to end poverty, fight inequality, and stop climate change through design and beauty. We just share with you tonight our small experience. I hope that this will be a new message for the future, that design makes the difference in all the context. And I strongly believe that in the most extreme context, design has a strong power because it's just giving the message to the people. We have the great chance to give a message to the people. And I was just remembering yesterday when I was preparing the presentation that because I'm part of also of the NGO in terms of volunteer, and I brought a group of patients from Central Africa Republic to Sudan to the cardiac surgery, and I saw their face in front of the building, in front of architecture, because the first thing they see is the building. It's quite obvious. We talk tonight also only of obvious things, but in that context, but also in our reality, we have to explore this simplicity, this idea that architecture can make the difference. So we don't know if we prove that it's possible to do, but at least we tried hardly. Thank you very much. Actually, the best part is if there are questions, so curiosity.
Normally we ask after the second question, second guest, but I think probably you could ask now. Do you have any questions to Raul? Máme tady mikrofony. You don't have very nice slides here. How did you feel? Comfortable? We will probably switch it off. So maybe you can tell how you connected your book with Alexander, because it's quite interesting.
And actually, it's a very interesting coincidence when I was reading the invitation, and it was I realized Alexander Brodsky and say, Alexander Brodsky. And I realized that we published his work in 1986 on our magazine that was called Utopica, Topic Utopia. And so it has been an extraordinary coincidence that after all this year, I never met him. So we just published him to be here with him. So it's great.
And could you tell us more about this Banca Etica? Because I haven't had any opinion about it.
Well,
what the concept is, and how did you found it personally?
Well, it's a bank. You have a credit card. It's an ordinary bank that is financing a project, only project that has a social scope. And all the money you put in the bank, you can just somehow track the money and say, I put my money and I want you to use this money for fair trade or cooperation or whatever. So in fact, it's also an issue of transparency. And I think it's, again, we were talking today about that, there is a big hope of somehow try to stress our contemporary society of the consumist system, try to shift the goal not from the profit but for the profit of society. So the ethic bank is exactly this, trying to work on the idea of money, and then we can discuss a lot about that, if a bank can be ethic or not, but that's it. But at least to shift the goal of the bank, not in making money, but in using the money in a social profitable way. And so the design of the bank has been very much linked with this idea. First of all, it has been a participatory process. Of course, as you can imagine, all our project, everybody's asking what's the different, so I'm making the question that normally comes from the audience. So what's the difference of working in this condition in Africa? And so in fact, there is not a real difference. I mean, it's just your approach of being part of a process. So participation, to define the stakeholders, to define the process where you are in, is the essential part. So going back to the role of the architect, is just the role of the architect is becoming more like a conductor of an orchestra, where you have all the instruments, you are trying to make them work together. So this project I show you today would never succeed with one man doing. I mean, it's a process where we stayed there, we spent a lot of time there, and we were part of a very, very articulate process. And so it's not the deus ex machina of the architects coming and designing his project. And that, that is another, we were already talking about this. This is another story. This is making the history of architecture. We are not pretending of making history of architecture. We are just trying to give a service. And with the bank has been exactly this idea, just to give a face to this will of creating a society that is dealing with money in a more ethic way. So this is something that is growing. I think that there is a big attention now to the ethic issue. As I was mentioning at the beginning, Biennale represent a good step. There has been a big attention about social design. I'm a bit scared because, the consumist system is just eating. So 10 years ago it was the time of sustainability. Everything has to be sustainable. And now in the agenda of the politician of all over the world, sustainability has disappeared. And now it's time of social responsibility. All the company are doing social responsibility, and social design is everybody has to design something in Africa. So of course I want to be always positive. So it's a good sign. There is a big attention. There is a big opportunity. We have to struggle to generate this opportunity of people that are just doing social design, not because it's a new trend, but because they are acting as activists in this social changement, in this social approach. So I hope that this small example I share with you they are just making a start in your brain, that within your work, your daily work, is irrelevant that if you're working in Italy or in Czech Republic or in Africa. It's just a matter of how you behave as a designer. If you strongly believe to be part of transformation of society. So I've been going longer. Sorry.
Thanks a lot. Máte nějakou otázku?
Hello. I have a question. Is the precondition of working in this field always the existence of some NGO or some corporation who let's say sponsors it, or are there maybe, or do you have any experience? Are there some other ways, maybe architects, like normal architects like us, can help? Maybe not full time, but somehow.
So we try to establish our profession in that field. I mean, we are gaining money out of that. It's a sustainable voluntary, because we are 15, we have 10 families, and so we have to survive somehow. No, we are not rich. So the precondition is that you have to find who are the potential client or supporter that can support this. So it's actually I show a project. The project in Senegal is a very interesting approach, because we have been called by a group of immigrants in Italy, Senegalese immigrants that were the diaspora. They want to build a eco village in their home village, and so we work as volunteer for 2 years on the project, and we generate the condition to get funding to the project and to the design. So we designed the group of NGO that support the project, try to contact different NGO, and we help them to find the financial support. And ourselves, we found the support from the Autodesk Foundation that support the design for almost 3 years. So it's somehow there's not a direct line. It can be a big NGO, can be international organization, but can be also somehow a work that you do it one spot. I strongly believe that one spot is good. I mean, now also a lot of big names are doing one spot project, but I think that you have to be part of this world. I mean, this approach is not one spot that you design a social project. You know, it's something. This was our choice. I mean, it was a professional and human choice as activists, and of course there can be different approach. But we strongly believe that it's much different to design a shop than to design a clinic in South Darfur. In fact, not in the result or not in the general approach, but because to design a clinic in South Darfur or wherever, it's something that you have to belong to that process. At least this is our experience. You cannot be just detached and say, well, okay, there is a client, let's say a client, an NGO that want to have a school in wherever, and I design a school. Because if you go through the design that now is coming out, because there are a lot of school, hospital designed by different kind of architect, and you see that the result in terms of aesthetic is quite good, but in terms of effect on the reality, it's just one spot. It's one spot of design. I mean, Francis Queré, well, at the Holcim presentation, he was saying, well, he was blaming his Burkina Faso that they are not using his hospital as a standard. And I was thinking that probably his beautiful schools are, I mean, they are really masterpieces in terms of architecture, but they are too much his own will of expressing, and they cannot be replicable because of different reasons, and in fact they haven't been adopted as a standard. So what I was mentioning before in the clinics in Iraq, that for us has been a fantastic result, because then it has become a standard. But of course then you have to put your ego one step behind. So this at least our experience.
Nějaká další otázka? So maybe we can ask after this second lecture. So thanks a lot for the lecture, and I would like to invite Alexander Brodsky. Yeah, you can sit.
Good evening.
How is it with the lights? Not good. Okay, we will try to.
Yes, it's really an amazing coincidence to meet here after 32 years. It's a great pleasure. So I firstly want to thank the organizers for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to come to Prague. It's beautiful and wonderful. So I'm very happy to come even for so short period. And what I wanted to show is a selection of my works, mainly old and very old works. But there are also some more recent. In a few words, I will introduce myself. Just a few words about what I was doing. I graduated from Moscow Architectural School about 200 years ago. And so at that time, it was absolutely not possible to be independent, be an architect. All architecture was totally under the state control, and so it was very difficult to, not for everyone. Some people liked it, some people not. So I was working with a friend of mine, a good friend Ilya Utkin, in the end of the school, and after graduation, we continued working together, made a lot of work in collaboration. But we couldn't build. We were not interested to be kind of small detail in a huge machine, because you had to go to these huge institutions. And as soon as we could, we escaped, and instead of, we had the diploma of architects, but for 20 years we were making art pieces, different kind of art, thinking about architecture, dreaming about architecture, but with absolutely no hope to build anything. But still, we were very happy. So in the 80s, we made a big series of etchings for Japanese conceptual competitions. This was allowed already at that time. And of course our main inspiration was Piranesi in 70s and 80s. And we studied etching technique ourselves. This was an important part of life, this etching press and all this ancient technique, so I'm still a big fan of this thing. So, sorry. I put this little picture of the dog in front of all of my presentations since it was done. I made this etching in '86, and there is not much reason to show it, but I think it just brings good luck. It's my friend's dog. It's a very small picture, so just showing my love for etching. And this is another very small project done recently. I have to say that. Thank you. I have to say that the pictures and presentations have no special order. Sometimes they no order at all. So this is quite recent. This was done about 2-3 years ago. The project is called The Last Address, organized by some good friends of mine. So it's dedicated to people who died during the Stalin period. Millions of people were killed at that period, and now not so many young people know anything about this. So the project somehow repeats this beautiful project that you can see in European cities, this bronze pavement about the victims of the Holocaust. So they wanted to make something like that, but not the same, of course. And there was a little design competition, so I was lucky to win it. And I suggested this plate, very simple, just metal plate with a square hole, like something that was lost. And and the short story of the man or woman who lived in this house in Moscow or other city. Now it's much wider. It went from Moscow to different other cities. So the name, the date of birth, the profession, the day when he was arrested, the day when the year he was executed, he was killed, and then the date when he was officially announced as innocent. And it's a very small plate, and the condition was that I asked them not to use any computer to make this signs. It had to be done by hand with this special ancient instrument with a hammer and this steel thing. So we found a man who was sitting day and night and making these letters. And now there is a lot of these plates all over Moscow. Some buildings have many of them. Like here, there's 4, but some even many more. So for me, it's also some kind of architecture. For many years, I was making art, as I said, and even when the life changed totally, which happened in the year 2000 for me, because it became possible to to have private clients, to open your private little office and to do architecture. This happens when I was not young anymore and didn't have any experience. But even after this, I continued making some art. So I divided my life between art and architecture from the very beginning, which was a very nice position in Moscow in the 80s. I was a member of Architect Union and Art Union, and nobody took me really seriously. They said, the architect said, well, he's not important, he's an artist. And the artist said, he's not dangerous, he's an architect. So I spent most part of my life balancing somehow on this border. So this presentation is a mixture of art pieces and some architectural, some pavilions. In my office, we also make real architecture, like houses, basically small things around Moscow, sometimes interiors, sometimes even a little bigger things. But the selection, I don't think that there are houses here. We'll see. So this was done in New York, a huge ear, 4 meters long, in the basement of the gallery, open to the street. So there was a story written there that I found the ear of a huge sculpture that goes under the whole Manhattan. And this is the first thing that was found. And the funny thing that a lot of people really believed and asked that it's necessary to inform the Ministry of Culture and so on. You could go down and look at the ear. And I made a big number of installations during years. This one was called the Pet Corner. It was my memories about the zoo. When there is some place where the animals are supposed to sleep, and when I was a little boy, I was standing for hours waiting until someone will come. Nobody came. So I made this kind of apartment building with a pot with milk and some leftovers, and the place where someone is sleeping. This was one of the biggest installations I made. This was in New York, called Canal Street Project. It was made on a kind of a wild place in Manhattan, under the Canal Street. There was a subway station not functioning for years, very scary place with rats and water dripping from the ceiling. And people had to change trains and to go through this station. So I made the real canal with water, 60 meters long, for several months. It was a temporary thing, with gondolas and some sound and some light. This was a public art project. And so finally, I got the first commission in my life. And this was a very scary moment because I was absolutely not sure that I can do this. I thought it might be too late to start. But somehow I decided to try. And this was a temporary structure. One of these temporary structures that lasts for years. It was supposed to be there for 1 or 2 years. Now it's already 18 years. Still there, but I didn't check it for a long time, but I know that it's still there. It was a summer restaurant. A very low budget thing, made of wood and plastic. So summer restaurant in winter. It's a very beautiful place on the lake, so I built it partly in the forest, partly on the water. And the inspection that came after it was almost opened, they thought that it's just a scaffolding. And that's how it survived. So the name was 95 degrees because I made all the vertical elements towards the angle towards the water, like trees. So this was the VIP room. Another public art project made in United States. This was a commission of Public Art Fund in Pittsburgh. They asked me to design some permanent, not permanent, but a long life sculpture. It was there for 5 years or 6 years, and asked me to use a couple of pieces from demolished downtown buildings from downtown Pittsburgh, some sculptures from the facades. And they showed me this warehouse where they kept these sculptures, and I asked them to give me all of them. So I built this huge pile of sculptures as a material part of the building which fell down. And the skeleton is made of scaffolding is there. So if you come closer, I don't have good photographs, unfortunately, but they're really wonderful masterpieces. All kinds of sculpture from these demolished buildings. Someone saved it. For many years I've had and still have a big passion for unfired clay. This is one of my favorite materials. I never make ceramic, never fire, which is much easier, much faster, and gives some very special spirit to the sculptures. They look like dust. They are very fragile, and you have this feeling that it can become dust at any moment. The other thing is that it's a material that you can use forever. You just pour water on your sculpture and make clay again, and that might last forever. You can make a sculpture, dry it, then you wet it, pour water, and make another sculpture. And this is also gives some special atmosphere, some feeling of time. So this was a very big work in New York Gallery in the 90s. It's called gray matter. Gray matter, what I was meaning, that it's memories, gray matter of your brain, combined with gray matter of this material, gray clay. And I made portraits of everyday objects without looking at them, as many as I could make in several months. So there was a big table, and you could find many different things there. And for me, it was really interesting how difficult it can be to make a sculpture. Even if you know this thing very good, but without looking at it, like you remember something that you saw every day all your life, and try to make it out of clay, and then you see that you don't remember it very good. And then some funny things happen. So this little Pushkin you can see in every Moscow apartment. And clay dog watching clay TV. So this is another example of temporary low-budget architecture. It was a cafe built not far from that restaurant on the same lake. So it was built very fast, existed for 3 or 5 years, and a lot of people went there during these years. It was just wood and plastic. But the important thing was that we made the main roof of very thick plastic and fixed thousands of plastic bags from both sides. So it was like a cloud, and the wind made a really wonderful sound all the time. So this existed for 5 years and then disappeared. The installation called Coma, it was about Moscow, basically, or maybe about some other city. Someone told me that it looks like Barcelona. Someone told me that it looks like some other city, but I was mainly thinking about Moscow. So it's a table in the hospital where the doctors make some terrible things with the city. And this black oil with the needles for injections. And the opening, I opened these needles and the oil started dripping inside the city, so it was sinking for a whole month. Became some kind of Venice. This was a very nice thing to do, make all these little buildings and build a city. This was done for Venice Biennale in 2006. The music and snow machine. It was a kind of aquarium with a very boring, sad city from 60s, inside covered with snow, and then you started turning this handle, and there was a very sad music and a snowstorm. This is one of my outdoors installation made many years ago in a beautiful village for some art festival. I picked a place not far from the village cemetery with a beautiful landscape and built this thing just to lie down and think and look at the river. This was about cemetery too, the tea bags in the sand. Another temporary structure that was called the Vodka Ceremony Pavilion. It was built all from old windows that I saved from demolished old building in the center of Moscow. It was always very difficult for me to pass by some piece of architecture that was thrown away, like the old door or old window. For years I didn't have space to keep, so I was really suffering. But sometimes I couldn't stand it. I took the window, I took the door, brought it home and tried to use it somehow. So for me the second life of these details is a very important thing. In Moscow there are a lot of things like that disappear in the junkyards. So now I have a little space. I keep a lot of windows, just in case. So this was one thing that this was built for 1 week and existed for 10 years, I think. Then it fell apart. So for this structure, I had to invent the ceremony, which was very simple. And this installation was made also a long time ago in Italy, in Torino. That was an architectural exhibition where architects were given small space to represent his own version of prison cell. This was a small room, and each participant made his own prison. So this was about the everyday life circles. All life is on the walls. The floor was covered with black oil, so it was the reflection of the sky, and you couldn't step there. So everything was on the walls. You wake up, you take to the stair, go to the toilet, then to the table, then to working place, bathroom, then bed again, and so on and so on. And this is installation made in Moscow. For many years I was making installations without the daylight. I don't know why, but I always make artificial light for my works. Even usually if the space has the window, I close it. And this was, so that's why I like basements very much. And if I see some beautiful big basement, I want to do something there. So this was a huge, very old basement from the 19th century under the wine factory in Moscow, 2,000 square meters. And I made a big installation with the artificial fire and little people sitting around the fire. It was called The Night Before the Offensive. So the fire was moving, and it was a very beautiful reflection on the walls and ceiling. You could travel in different spaces in this basement and look. 20 garbage containers. This doesn't need explanation. There was a Manhattan-looking city inside, and the very strong sound of a big city went out of the containers. This was made on the same lake. This was one of the most successful buildings that I built. It was built on ice, from ice. We just made a hole in the ice and poured water on the metal mesh, and very fast on the wooden structure, very fast we made ice walls. This was a bar. And the bad thing was that it was melted when the sun was too hot. So I had to repair it all the time. And then it disappeared with the ice. This is a little sculpture representing this very popular architectural shape that, I don't know how it is here, but in Moscow, every house has this entrance to the basement attached to the building. So this shape from when I was a little boy was very mysterious for me. It kind of symbolizes the entrance to some other world. So I combined it with the metro. And this was a very little sculpture, but once I made the big version of it for some exhibition. The sinking building made of clay. This is also unfired clay. And this was a big installation made for some show about the train. It was a combination of the train and mental hospital. And the most important thing here was that this image from Russian, Soviet old trains where you have this glass with tea on the table, and the table is trembling. So the spoon in the glass makes this very special noise when the train is moving. So I made this. The wind is going out of the window, and the table is moving. So the spoon gives this noise that everyone who traveled on train remember this. Some city installation with garbage containers and telephone that doesn't work. My memory is from Moscow. This was a big installation in Vienna. We collected a huge number of objects painted black, and I made the reflection pool. This was a very complicated thing. Also temporary, of course. It was an exhibition that lasted for two months. And the main thing here, which is really difficult to understand when you look at the photograph, was the movement, because there were like 5 or 7 layers of these objects and the black oil. So when you just looked at it, everything was that didn't move. But when you move along the pool, all these layers and the reflection started moving. It is difficult to explain, but it was really kind of very deep reflection. You feel that you was feeling that you can fall down there at like 100 meters. All these objects above. So it was kind of archaeological thing. One more pavilion that was built for, again, for art festival, but for longer period is still there for several years. The Rotonda, just for observing landscape. It is a very beautiful place. So I used all doors, all different. The size of the structure was just, I decided it because of the amount of number of doors. That's what they could afford, these people. So, and for me, in terms of architecture, this was very interesting experience because the space inside changed really radical according to the opened and closed doors. You open one door and it's just normal space for the entrance. 2 doors, and then you open half of them, it's very different. You open all of them, it's completely different space. So it's just standing in the middle of the field and people can come and make fire, sit there, a lot of people coming. There was another version of this rotonda made later. So here I found the doors in some old boat station from 40s that were supposed to be destroyed, and I saved these doors and windows and built this other rotonda. And it was traveling all through Europe. So it was in Paris, here it's in Tuileries Garden, it was in Milano and many other places. But now I don't know where is it now. Yes, this is a rare example of practical thing that we make sometimes in our office. This is a house for a big family outside of Moscow in a beautiful place near the river, built about 10 years ago. or 8 years ago. So you see that it has transparent roof and terraces on the flat roofs. So all these people in summer, all their life is under this roof. This all built of wood, so quite a low budget structure too. This was amazing opportunity for me because I was given the possibility to use amazing space, kind of one of the crazy secret places in Moscow that still exist. This was several years ago, and they discovered the huge space under the ground, not in the very center, but not far from the center of Moscow, which was completely forgotten for many years. It was built in early 60s as a container for water in case of nuclear war. And then they forgot about it for many years. And then they discovered it and made some kind of art space. So I made these fake windows with the wind moving the curtains and light. And this is about 15 meters under the ground. And it has the walls more than almost 2 meters thick concrete walls. So the effect was really strong. People, after half an hour, they forgot completely that they're under the ground. They thought they're in a tower. One of the most temporary things, this was just for 1 month in a big park in Moscow. This is one of the most important things we did because this was the only building that we built outside of Russia. This was a project about bus stops in Krumbach in Austria, organized by Vienna Art Centrum. It was a very nice thing because they invited seven or eight, I think seven architects from different countries. And each group had to design one bus stop on one line, so that they really work as bus stops. So if you take a bus, you can go and see 7 strange things on the way. This bus stop is still there, still functioning. It was our only experience to work in collaboration with Western architects. They made some technical drawings for it, and the carpenters, really amazing, they made this. Some other works of clay. This is reliefs, very thin, very thin and very fragile. So it's even for me, it's a big surprise that they survive some exhibitions, and I send them sometimes to other countries, and when people see them, they think it's not possible to breathe near this thing, but somehow they travel and come back, and they're strong enough. So this was a little exhibition in London a couple of years ago in the gallery, where I made some sketches and some clay objects. This is 2 years old work that maybe some of you have seen because it was in Venice for the Biennale. That was a really wonderful moment of my life, because I was invited to take part in this Biennale, and I was given the possibility to choose the site in the very beginning, when everything was possible. Alejandro Aravena was the curator, and somehow he asked me to find a place, so I was thinking, and then I found the most beautiful place that was possible. Behind Arsenale, this corner of two canals with wonderful landscape. And we built this very simple thing from the materials that we brought from Moscow. A very cheap roof material, you know. So it was there during Biennale. Well, you could understand that I really love sheds. Sheds is something special for me. And this is almost the, the end of the story. For many years, I was very much fascinated by the very common thing that you see everywhere in Soviet Union, in Moscow, in Russia, the concrete fences. I don't know if you have it. I don't think we have this sort of things here, but in my country, it's millions and millions of these concrete blocks, these slabs, covers the earth everywhere in the cities, outside of the cities. They put them around the construction sites. They put them around the junkyards everywhere. And usually people think that they're very ugly. But I was really fascinated by them for years and thought about building something. Actually, I wanted to build the living house, but this was kind of a sketch built for an art festival. So, the house for trees. But right now we're finishing the other version of it, the house where people can live, made from the same material. This was made last year in London. Another pavilion that was an exhibition dedicated to 100 years from 1917, revolution, and there was an exhibition about Russian poetry. 20 poets that were somehow abused by Soviet power and emigrated or put to prison. So this pavilion was made for poetry. There were 20 poems of 20 poets inside. And this represented the train that takes them away from Moscow. So there were these poems and video from the train on both walls. So the train was moving from summer to winter to snow. And this is quite new. This was made this year in May in Georgia, in Tbilisi, one of my favorite cities. I was asked to build something also for some art festival, and they found these wonderful old glass blocks. So I used them for this pavilion. And the roof is made of the same stuff. And finally, this little house that I was dreaming about for many years. It's outside of Moscow, and it's almost finished now. So in a couple of months, people can live there. But it's not for the client. It belongs to some people who will rent it for vacation to some companies. So it's a little palazzo made of fence. A very narrow building. It's not easy to live there, but possible. I think that's it. Like I show the dog in front of my presentation. For many years I show some drawings of my kids when they were very small, because I think that it's a real masterpiece. Now they're quite big, but this drawing is still my favorite. This is my daughter's drawing when she was 4 years old at the dentist. And even more scary, my son's drawing when he was 3.5 years old. This is called Mother Putting Drops into the Nose. Thank you very much. Thank you. And of course, if you have questions.
Už je funkční. So any questions from your colleague? Do you remember which project did you use?
It was a bridge project. There was a very long bridge project, I remember.
It was in 1986. I don't remember. I remember the magazine, but what was the project?
It was a sort of bridge crossing on a diagonal thresholding project or something like that. It was written in Russian, so I couldn't understand.
Tak otázky? I have some question, probably because you teach at the ETH, and in Switzerland there is Valerio Oggiati, and his father was also collecting doors and windows. Do you know about him, or he was also a very good architect?
Well, I know about him, of course, but I never met him.
But his father, Rudolf Oggiati, he was collecting all the windows and doors from the village.
I never heard this.
It's quite interesting.
Well, I think many people are collecting these beautiful things. It's just the problem of space, where to keep. A lot of people would like to collect, but.
So do you have anything like storage place, or?
I have my office, where now it's more space occupied by windows and doors than working places. Everything covered with windows and doors.
So you have to make another pavilion.
Yeah, I'm waiting for some possibility.
Maybe there is some client in the audience. We can invite also Raul for dialogue. Tak máme nějaké otázky na kohokoliv. Máme tady i házecí mikrofon někde.
Maybe it's just a stupid question, but I'm feeling that you work with a time a lot, the timeless or the endless. Is it true or not? Just the time like a time that something stays for long or just for a short time? And if you take care about this issue, about the timing or time lapse in your artwork?
Well, yes, it's a lot of things there. It's about time, and I think time is a terrible thing. So it's a very weak attempt to make it better, to fix it somehow, but it doesn't work. It goes.
Nějaká další otázka z pódia? Tak we can thank you to you, but I think somebody from audience will come personally for questions. Thanks very much for beautiful lectures and we stay in contact. And come, přijďte v prosinci samozřejmě. První čtvrtek v měsíci Sola Morales, španělští architekti. Děkujeme.
Bye.